Alright, so, this idea was kind of kicking around in my head today, so I figured, you know what? I'm going to actually do this as a whole video. And as you can see, Blood Angel Marco. We're going to be doing another Warhammer 40k Disney series AU. I've kind of done those. I've done those a few times this year, but this one's a little fun because this time I get to focus on an actual Space Marine chapter in part of these AUs. So let's get into it. So the story begins is that Marco Diaz from Star vs. the Forces of Evil, like I said, Marco in here is a Blood Angel, but he's not just a Blood Angel, he's an apothecary. And basically he and a combat patrol he's a part of are in the midst of battling they're in the midst of battling an orc invasion, like an orc Wa, that has been tearing through the sector, and they were the closest force to assist this hive world. They've basically been fighting for several days. They've lost several brothers, and Marco himself is starting to give into the the red thirst and everything else. But he needs to collect the gene seed, or at the very least heal the brothers he's lost. So he's trying desperately to save as many of his brothers as he can. But he just feels like he's failing every time. Like he just keeps feeling like he's just losing everyone he's cared about, and it's starting to get at him. But as he and his brothers get the city defenses up and everything else, they stand for one last fight, and in the midst of it they just give in the black rage, except Marco, who's he has to hold it back because he tells the others when you all fall, I have to be the one to protect our gene seed, the blood, we have to protect the blood of our father, sanguineous. So they're all fighting, and even Marco himself is doing the best he can to fight and die alongside the others. And as he's being slaughtered as his brothers are being slaughtered left and right, he just gets overwhelmed by the green tide of the orcs, and he thinks, yep, I'm gonna die, but at least I'll be embraced by my father and everything else. I'll be embraced in the loving arms of Sanguinius and everything else, and the Emperor. But he instead wakes up in what looks like a med bay, or a version of it, and he immediately knows this is not a medical facility of the Imperium, or even one of his brother's ships. It's not his chapter's ship. It's nothing. It's a Xeno ship, and he's like, no fucking way. So he immediately starts getting up, trying to get up, but he's wounded horribly. He's wounded from being overwhelmed by the orcs, and that's when he feels this psyker energy pin him back down, and someone goes, sit the fuck back down, sit down. You're still your wounds are still healing, Monkai. And he's like, oh no, it's an Eldar ship. And he's like, what do you want, you filthy Xenos? Why did you capture me? For some kind of experiment or something? And that's when the leader of this, Queen Moon, she introduces herself as I am Moon, and you're on Craft World Muni, and we saved you. And he's like, saved me for what? For some horrible experiment? I don't trust you filthy Xenos as far as I can throw you. And she goes, yeah, we're very aware, Monkai. But we saved you not because you were, because you were the last remaining one. We didn't fucking care. All your brothers were already dead already. But the reason we saved you specifically is because you're a medic. You're an apothecary, specifically of the Blood Angels, and we needed you. We needed someone of medical expertise of your chapter. And he's like, okay, why? Second of all, no, whatever it is. But then they explain there's been some kind of malady going across the craft world, and it's been spreading to some of the other craft worlds like a virus. And it's similar to the red thirst that the Blood Angels go through. Now, they have been looking for a cure themselves, but when they figured out that this disease is so close to the Blood Angels' affliction of the red thirst, they're like, we needed some actual insight. And since we couldn't reach your chapter master Dante, we decided. And he goes, you decide to kidnap me. you know. And they're like, well, it's not like we can ask the Imperium for help, now can we? And he goes, well, Lord Gilliman thinks that you are useful in some capacity, but I see the point. At the same time, the answer's still no, Zeno. This red thirst is an affliction, but it's also a gift, and you treat my gene father's disease, my arc. It's not a curse if you use it well. And they're like, yeah, we see it as a curse. And here's the thing: you can say no, and you can die, or here's what you get out of it. You get to live, first off, but secondly, and they hold, Moon holds up the gene seeds of the other Space Marines that had died during the Combat Patrol's battle with the Orcs. And he's like, you give those back right now, or I swear I will kill every last one of your Xeno brothers and sisters on this craft world to get them back. And Moon's like, you are in no position to talk. And to prove a point, she just blasts him against the wall. And she's like, have I got your attention now? So here's the thing, Apothecary. You're gonna help cure our people of this red thirst. Then we will give you the gene seed and return you back to Ball. We'll return you back to your world, and everything will be fine. But if you fuck up or try to screw us over or try to make this disease worse, we'll kill you and we'll destroy these gene seeds. And from what I understand, you Space Marines need them, for the tithes and whatnot. So we got a deal. And Marco begrudgingly agrees, and they're like, great. To show you I'm you're free to, traverse the craft world, and you will have everything we have at your disposal to fix this cure. But at the same time, don't try to escape or kill any of us, or we will kill you and just find another one. We will find another Apothecary, and think of the gene seeds. So Marco begrudgingly agrees, and he begins work. They give him his own station, and he begins testing it. And he's like, "You gotta understand, we don't have. This is a genetic this is genetically intrinsically tied to our blood. There's no cure for it. I don't think I could find a cure, and there's a good chance that I may not be able to reverse it. If it affects us, and we can't cure it, what hope is there for you?" And to which Moon is like, well, perhaps you can find it because we weren't born with it like you were. That's our train of thinking, is that because we weren't born with this malady, you can actually cure it because it's not genetically encoded into our DNA like it is with you. So yeah. So Marco begins work on it, and he's for a few days he just locks himself into a science lab, given everything. Even though he's like, this is some xenotechnology, he has to ask for help figuring out how some of this works. Where he's like, he has to go to the nearest Eldar guard watching over him, and he's like, how does this work? And they're like, oh, goddamn Monkai. While this is going on, this is when Moon's daughter Star shows up, and she's curious because she's never seen a human, let alone a Space Marine. And he's like, I'm an apothecary, but yes, I am a Space Marine. And she's like, oh, so you're one of those Emperor's angels, right? Do you have wings? And he's like, no, our father had wings. And he's like, oh, your dad had wings. So she's asking all these questions, and Marco's just like, look, what do you want? What do you want, Zeno? And she's like, well, I prefer you start by not calling me Zeno. I'm not calling you Monkai. And he's like, all right. What do you prefer, Ma'am? And she goes, Star. And he goes, Apothecary Marco. And she's like, I'll just call you Marco. So Star gets closer to Marco as he's working on it. She also tells him all about the craft worlds and maiden worlds and everything else. And Marco in turn casually shares information about his world, Ball and everything else, and Sanguinius's sacrifice to Horus. And they start growing close. They're genuinely growing close to one another. And during that time, Marco is testing the DNA and testing a possible antidote. But he needs a subject first. He needs a genuine subject to infect with this red thirst disease they have. And then he can experiment from there. And Star goes, I can do it. And Marco's like, absolutely not. Your mother would not allow this, and I can't afford, and I'd prefer not to lose you. So Marco gets convinced by Stars, like, this is for, like, Stars like, this is my people, you know, we need this, like, we need you, you know, you're the only one who can save us, and if this will help my people, then do it. So he infects her with the disease. She immediately starts going all red thirst on him. He hits her with the cure, like the prototype cure, and he's like, yes, perfect, it works. It's not pretty because she convulses and almost, like, dies for a hot second, but it does work on her. And he's like, this will give it, like, it's not perfect, but this could definitely, like, this will help your species. Like, this will cure you of the red thirst and everything else. But I'm gonna need to work on it just a bit more, and your people are gonna have to use your science and magics to, like, also perfect it. I think I can only go so far. And he's like, so how did this happen? He's also asking, like, Star and Moon and the others, and he's like, so how did this happen specifically? I want to know how this disease was caused. I'm very curious, like, how did this start? And they're like, well, our ships ran into someone very familiar to you. They called themselves the Death Guard, and he goes, Mortarian. Should have guessed. And he goes, the Death Guard, the vile sons of Nurgle. The sons of Mortarian. And they're like, well, one specifically was among them spreading the plague. And he's like, Typhus, right? Big guy, carried a scythe. And they're like, yeah, how'd you know? He's like, who else could it have been? The champion of Nurgle and everything else. And they're like, and he's like, but why would Typhus concern himself with the craft worlds? Probably because, and they're like, well, you know, they're all, isn't the Nurgle all about, like, disease and spreading it? Maybe he wanted to use, like, a disease that we couldn't cure specifically, and he probably thought we'd be too stubborn to go to you for help. So, yeah, that's for the possible one. But Marco has synthesized a good enough cure for it. But at that moment, that's when, of course, the Death Guard do show up. And so the Death Guard, Typhus, led by Typhus himself, storm the craft world, and the Eldar and Marco's given his bolter and chainsword back, and he's like, well, you're just a medic. How could how can you fight? And he goes, I'm also a mage. I'm an angel of mercy and of death. So Marco and the Eldar, along with Star, Moon, and the others, they're all, like, holding the line, battling it out, but it's very clear that the Death Guard are clearly, pretty damn strong. And they're here, Typhus is here specifically because he wants to destroy that cure, because he wants to spread Grandfather's new plague across them, and hopefully, like, it's his hope that it'll mutate and this red thirst will spread across other species as well, so from the Eldar to regular humans to everything else, and it'll be like, we call it do you want to know what we call it, Apothecary? We call it the Plague of Sanguinius. The poison blood of Sanguinor himself. And we have your chapter to thank for it. There were so many dead bodies we could collect. Gene Seed notwithstanding. So Marco is, of course, enraged by this, goes to battle Typhus in a one-on-one fight, almost loses, but Star's there to help fight Typhus off. And it's very clear that the Eldar are going to get overwhelmed because now more of the Death Guard and even Plague Demons are starting to show up. So Marco's basically like, you guys run. I'm going to distract them and make them think I have the cure, because they don't care about you. They care about destroying this cure. So take it, and I will distract them so you can get away. But Star's like, no, we can escape, we can do all of that. And he's like, listen, take this and take the genes, keep the gene seed of my brothers safe. Get them home to Ball. So Marco escapes on a small ship, sending a message to Typhus saying, I have the cure, follow me if you want to get your grandfather's approval. So Typhus breaks off the attack, and the Death Guard chase after Marco. following him to a small moon where he gives into the black rage, like he's just giving into the black rage, and he's yelling at Typhus, the Death Guard, and even like a couple of great unclean ones. He's just yelling at them, I am a son of Sanguinius, and I swear I will drink on your blood as much as you spill of mine. So he's just got his bolter chainsword in hand and just dives at the Death Guard, fighting and killing his way through of them until he's overwhelmed and this time dies. But Craftworld Muni does succeed in keeping the antidote safe, and they do spread it not just through their to their craft world, but the other craft worlds as well that were starting to be infected by it. It isn't until long before the craft world Muni does appear before Ball, and yeah, the Blood Angels and Dante aren't exactly cool with the idea of a craft world showing up, but Moon shows up. She's like, hey, we're cool. I have these gene seeds to give to you, and one more. Because they went back and actually saved Marco's body and collected his gene seed. And they're like, we were, one of your member of your chapter saved our species, and this is the least we can do for him. So Dante respects them and is like, thank you for, I thank you for saving our kind, our brothers in blood. What was the apothecary's name? They go, Brother Marco Diaz, and he was like, and Dante's like, let his name be remembered forever in the Imperial Codex. He is now sharing. He shares drinks deep with our father Sanguinius. So, yeah, there's the end of the story. So there you go, guys. That is Blood Angel Marco. I want to, this is a fun one to do. I had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, you guys tell me in the comments below what you guys think of it. Comment below, let me know. Other than that, I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.